Hey y'all, welcome to this week's show. I hope everyone had a wonderful Christmas. If you're celebrating Hanukkah, I hope you're enjoying that. Getting ready for New Year's. I don't really celebrate New Year's. It's not my thing, you know. Single guy, it's just not much fun, honestly. So you may hear me kind of choke and sniffle a little bit here because I just really polished off some of the spiciest habanero salsa I've ever made. So, nose is running a little bit, and it kind of, it's a good expectorant to say the least. I love spicy foods. And, we talk a lot about I guess you would call the nexus between herbal medicine and food in my show, probably more than most herbal podcasts, and of course far more herbal medicine than any podcast that I'm aware of that talks about cooking in any way, shape, or form, or foraging or anything like that. I really think you get a broad spectrum of information here, and it's because I live the life I talk about. I was thinking about it the other day. The skills that our ancestors took for granted. I have books on everything from furniture making to carving wooden spoons to growing gourds and making gourd banjos, to pottery, blacksmithing, basket weaving. And, I think about like my great grandparents, they knew how to do all that. I mean, you think about the banjo that came to America from Africa via the slave trade and was quickly adopted by especially Celtic settlers. And we have this great tradition of the banjo in both black and rural white culture. A lot of people don't know that these days because, I don't know why, it kind of fell out of fashion in media to show black people playing a banjo in the 70s and 80s or 90s. They invented the instrument. I mean, it really should be a source of ancestral pride. And if you're unaware of the great tradition of black banjo players, start with Rihanna Gibbons and the Carolina Chocolate Drops. These are really some of the most fantastic musicians from North Carolina that really preserve that old, somewhat bluesy style of old-time music that was such an influence on me growing up, playing Piedmont blues and old-time country and bluegrass and etc. With both cultures, and very much we were at the same places together, mixed together. There was really no racial stratification whatsoever, and include in that, so many of the great Cherokee banjo players. They have a fantastic tradition of banjo. Raymond Fairchild will blow your mind. But, anyway, it just hit me. I was thinking, my great-grandparents would know how to grow the gourd, cure it, cure the skin. Well, first of all, kill the animal, skin the animal, take the hair off the hide, preserve that skin. Essentially, it's like rawhide, and then soak it in water. stretch it to make the drum head. Banjos used to be made from gourds. I'm not sure if I actually made that clear. Long neck gourds, and you would cut the front off the bowl portion at the bottom, the globe size portion, and you would put a drum head over it. That would be tacked in place. You'd put a bridge on there. You'd string it. Well, before you strung it, you actually had to put a fretboard on. So that's another portion of it. They'd have to know woodworking and carving to put the fretboard on. There'd have to be a peg head to put the tuners in place. Then they had to know how to make the strings. They were usually gut strings, another process of an animal product. Then you had to know how to play the dang thing, right? So, I mean, skills that now one person may have a little bit here, and another person may have a little bit there. Our ancestors just a couple of generations ago knew it all. They could buy a piece of land or inherit it. They could clear it. They could lay a foundation, build a house, build a chimney and a fireplace. They knew how to cook. They knew how to farm. They knew how to do anything you can imagine. That's how really my grandfather was really the last in our family that really knew everything. And when I tell you the man could do anything, I mean, there was like literally nothing he couldn't do, from fix cars and tractors to farm to weld to do plumbing, electric. I mean, yeah, he was a self-taught electrician. He was a draftsman, an engineer. He was a farmer. He was into permaculture before it had a name. He was a justice of the peace, a game warden, and a politician. I mean, there was nothing. I mean, if something broke on the farm, he'd pull out his welding gear. I mean, he could do everything. And my grandmother was the same way, with a lot of what we consider more of the farmstead skills of growing and preserving food and cooking and sewing and it's really through her I get my tradition of basket making, and I mean, they knew all kinds of home remedies and herbal medicine, and that's what I'm saying is, like, I don't have everything they have, but I think my show, because I do have a little of each of those things, and I keep trying to go back and learn the skills I don't know. I try to make an effort to learn at least one new skill a year. I've been actually I dabbled a little in pottery. I've dabbled a little in blacksmithing. Next couple of years, I'm going to try to incorporate those into the things I do. Living in the modern world, I had to start with small engine repair and plumbing and electricity and all the practical skills around the house before I can get into the stuff that I really enjoy. But I do think it's an eclectic show, and I really do think it offers a broader spectrum of information than really any other podcast of which I'm aware. Now, I may be wrong, and if there's somebody out there that has a lot of these same interests, heck, I'd love to get to know you. We'll be great friends. Maybe we can teach some classes together, or even do what I've been wanting to do it was my grandfather's dream, to set up like a folk life school, a living history museum where you could teach people. And it's just, whether you're interested in like the arts and crafts side or the gardening side, or maybe you're a hardcore prepper, and you just want to know this stuff, you can. So many of these people come together in such an environment like that. They may be just honest, hardworking country people. They may be people like one generation away from the farm or two, and they remember what their grandparents did. They may be on the far left or the far right. And it really doesn't matter, because we just kind of come together to learn the skills and enjoy each other's company. And I used to do a lot more of that back when I worked as a storyteller and a professional storyteller and musician, and somewhat of a craftsman in my younger years. And everything from summer camps to bluegrass festivals to all these like rural get-togethers. I would love to fulfill my grandfather's dream and essentially have a living example of how all these things were done, hands-on, teach you how to do it. The cooking classes as well, culinary classes, medicine classes, full herb school. That is the eventual goal that God willing I will have the lifespan and funds to be able to achieve. Say a prayer. I get to do that. I think it would be wonderful, and all my listeners. I look forward to meeting you all and just hanging out, and we can have like weekend programs or week-long or month-long or year-long programs where you live on the site. I mean, that would be the goal. And that's kind of what I lay awake thinking about at night, is how to accomplish that goal. But when we're talking about the nexus between herbal medicine and food, I think it's really important. I love the holidays. I love Thanksgiving. I love Christmas. Like I said, I'm not a big New Year's guy, but I love the food. Let's face it, it tends to be a little bit rich, heavy, and bland. I mean, turkey's wonderful. I love ham, of course. I'm a ham fanatic. I come from a family history of curing ham, so I really get into ham and sausages and all that. But you get a lot of stuffing, and you get a lot of your green bean casseroles and mashed potatoes and all that. And after a few weeks, a couple of months of eating that way, I tend to kind of get bored of it. I tend to kind of lose my sense of taste. Now, cranberry sauce, if you like that gives you a nice bitter counterpart. It keeps the taste buds going. If you include pickles with your meal, and that's why I ended up making a hot salsa today, is because I was like craving something spicy. It's like I just didn't want to eat anything more, and that's not like me. And it made me think of my grandmother and great grandmother and so many of the old folks in my family and others that I knew. My wonderful friend Miss Irene, who was in a terrible nursing home for almost 20 years. She had a stroke in her 70s and lived to be almost 100. So from about 80 to about 100, she lived in a horrible nursing home. And I mean, it wasn't abusive or anything, but it was neglectful, and so I'd visit her as much as I could. She was a great influence in my cooking. We always took recipes, talked recipes. She was, her cousin was next door neighbor to the Cajun chef Justin Wilson. So, we would really get into the Cajun recipes, and she almost like vicariously, she would, when you cook this, call me and tell me about it, and she loved that. And of course, I'd tell jokes and stories, and it made a big difference. But the food they serve to old people, whether it's in a nursing home, a hospital, you know what hospital food's like, retirement homes and such, tends to be very bland. It tends to only focus on salt and sugar. And I've told you this story before. When my grandmother, she'd had a heart attack, and she was somewhat wheelchair bound. She could use a walker, but she'd have to sit down and spend most of the time in the wheelchair. So I'd wheel her into the kitchen, and she taught me, for the years that I helped take care of her, it was just 2, 3, 4 years, I guess, total, taught me all about cooking in that traditional French Southern way. What really turned her around, extended her life from that period of time, because they were ready to let her die in a nursing home, literally. I mean, there had been some medical error. They didn't really want to admit it. And they were just feeding her all this like bland, sweet food. And she lost her appetite completely. And when we got her home, first thing you do was, okay, what would you cook tonight, if you were cooking? And she'd walk me through it. And I learned if I added a little parsley, if I added a little extra black pepper, these things that would stimulate the salivatory glands, stimulate the appetite. Bitters. I wasn't really using medicinal bitters with her, but bitter greens. She loved collard greens, turnips. Things like that need to be in our diets. We need not just the typical American processed food diet that's killing everybody, which is sweet and salty and carbohydrate laden. No, we need bitter. Bitter is essential. Bitter is good for our liver. Bitter is good for our digestion. Bitter stimulates the salivatory glands. So, from an herbal medicine perspective, we can certainly use digestive bitters. I love the Swedish bitters. I've done several shows on the old recipe Swedish bitters, but there's so many, from cocktail bitters like Angostura or Peychaud. There's another one right in the back of my mind, not coming to me. But bitters you can make yourself from orange peel or lemon peel, or bitter herbs. So many bitter herbs that are they're good for the blood pressure. They're good. I mean, the blood sugar. Well, they're good for the blood pressure too. But anyway, that's the whole systems. We'll get into. I don't want to get into energetics right now. They're really essential. But so is the taste of sour. Pickles, sauerkraut. You need that flavor as well. We have these senses of taste, and if you ignore that, I mean, that's why at least have some pickles. Just naturally fermented dill pickles is my preference. But of course, I make sauerkraut all the time, and I've given you my sauerkraut recipes. I ferment so many vegetables to get that bitter, sour, and then that kind of what they call now umami, that kind of funky flavor. Um, if you don't have those, you are going to lose your appetite. And then for me and for my uncle and great uncle and my other uncle, I mean, all the men in our family and several of the women, especially my great grandmother, spicy, hot, piquant. I think my great grandmother was probably the only person in our county that grew hot peppers. And she grew a lot of hot peppers. And we grew up eating fresh hot peppers and pickled hot peppers, part Creole, that's part of our culture. Everybody else was English or Scots Irish or German. So it was kind of, unique in that area of North Carolina. But everybody said that our family's food was better than anybody else's in the entire community. So, for me, when I've been spending a few weeks eating that bland food, I start to lose my appetite. And that's exactly what happens to people. What they used to call convalescence, people recovering from an illness, older people, and they start giving them Ensure, which is just sweet and nasty. And you drink a can of that, and it's going to keep you alive, but you're not going to have an appetite for anything for the next 24 hours. And what do you get the next day? A can of Ensure and maybe some Jell-O. That's not the way things ought to be done. I firmly believe the old adage, let medicine be thy food and food be thy medicine. All of the culinary herbs that we now use, from parsley to sage, rosemary, thyme, garlic, onions, etc., that's all herbal medicine. That's all ingredients, and etc., etc., etc. I mean, the spices, the cloves, the cinnamon, and I mean, everything. All that came into our diets originating as herbal medicine. Most of it was used to preserve meat or to settle an upset stomach, like caraway seeds and all kinds of stuff like that. Fennel seeds, another great example. You can use caraway and fennel and make excellent pickles, and think about what that's going to do for a person's digestion. And get some pickles in there, and you get a little bit of fiber or some sauerkraut. It's going to help from one end to the other, which is another huge issue in nursing homes and etc. Hospitals. They just start putting people on laxatives because they're not giving them any fiber. And they're not moving around either. A lot of times they won't let them move around. So anyway, that I just wanted to make that point that while I love all, the meat and gravy and potatoes of the traditional American diet, we got to remember that, pick up a cookbook from the 1800s, pick up a cookbook from the 1700s, or even, around 1900. Our ancestors were using a lot more ingredients and a lot more herbs and spices than we've really been led to believe. Our mindset now of what is a traditional American diet really comes out of rationing from the World Wars and the Great Depression. It's not what our ancestors were living on, unless you were an immigrant coming over from Ireland in the potato famine, and you had a starvation level diet of potatoes and some salted meat. That's about it. But when you got to America, the land of plenty, our ports were bustling with bringing in herbs and spices from all over the world, and people had gardens growing far more diverse vegetables and herbs than you could find in any grocery store today. And I know I keep hammering on this point, but I honestly do believe that's why my great-grandparents and great-great-grandparents and basically anybody who wasn't killed in a war lived to be around 100 years old. Until that last generation, that 1950s generation, my grandfather and grandmother, he contracted ALS probably due to chemical exposure working in naval yards and the agricultural chemicals he had to use on the farm. Basically mandated, if you wanted to have crop insurance, you had to use horrible stuff. And my grandmother died in her 80s, which in today's standards is, a long life. But her mother died at 96, I believe. And her great grandmother was right in there at just about 100, and it's still, you can tell when the diets began to become more simplified, more industrialized, more processed food, and more chemicals being used, both in food and on the farm and in everyday life, things started to change. And then the second generation, my aunts and uncles, you're talking people dying in their 50s and 60s and all that. So it's not good. And whether it's herbal medicine or diet, I really do believe it is incumbent upon us to change this before it's too late. So now let's talk about a few plants. And we will start with, as we usually do, I think I'll probably do a couple of plants from my spring foraging cookbook because they're short entries. The first is Oxeye Daisy. And I kind of hesitated to include this one in the foraging book. It's very pungent. Okay, it's a little more than a tasty herb in small amounts. It's not what you would make a meal out of. Okay, so gather the tender spring leaves, toss them into anything you want to flavor. It's really, it has some medicinal value, but mostly you're just going to eat small amounts just to perk up a dish. And really, it tastes a lot like yarrow. And yarrow, of course, we've done full programs on its medicinal values. But I don't think many people use yarrow as a culinary herb. It's actually quite good. Hard to describe the flavor. It's a little bit like calamus root. It's a little peppery. It's a little bitter. And in small amounts, it's very good. And you can use Oxeye Daisy interchangeably. And of course, they're both very pretty and nice in the garden. And a few leaves really work well. I've given you my recipes for like, what would you call it? Generic Asian soup and noodle dishes, right? In some Asian cultures, they use edible chrysanthemums, and those are quite good as well. You can grow those in the garden. Oxeye Daisy is a little along that lines in flavor, so it's where I usually use them. I don't use them a lot. And when I do, I'm just probably tossing it in with something that's got a little soy sauce and fish sauce and hot peppers in it and a lot of garlic, and it works really well. It's quite tasty, but it is strong and bitter. Not to most people's taste on its own. I would just add a little bit at a time until you get used to it, and probably wouldn't surprise it on somebody else. This isn't one of those this is one of those where somebody's going to go, whoa, what is that? It is strong, but it's good. It is good once you get used to it. Now, the other is really interesting, and it's peppergrass. We've discussed peppergrass as well medicinally. Peppergrass is closely related to field cress, C-R-E-S-S, and they're the Lepidium species. Much underutilized plant. Medicinally, these herbs may have adaptogenic properties, and certain varieties of peppergrass, especially those, I think, grown in the mountains of South America, like the Andes or something, have been shown to increase testosterone in men. So, the rest haven't really been studied. We don't really know because, see, that was like an ethnic, a cultural medicine for that region. People started studying and seeing, well, does this really increase testosterone? So we know about their peppergrass. We don't know about the peppergrass. It's actually a fairly common weed throughout most of North America. It's really one of the more common weeds. Tender green, but in terms of culinary, tender green and shoots of the plant may be prepared as a pot herb and eaten raw. They're quite good. But the real value of the plant, also in culinary terms, is the seeds. The seeds, as the name implies, taste just like black pepper. Now, these days, most folks take black pepper for granted. In ancient Rome, pepper was one of the most expensive and valued of all spices, and they would go to great lengths, wars, to ensure the trade routes that supplied pepper. Pepper is both medicinal and enhances the flavor of food, of course, and we use it, we don't even think about it. We put salt and pepper as if it's just like, common. Actually, it's a powerful medicinal herb, and it's really an essential culinary spice, I guess I should say, because it comes from the seed. The seeds of peppergrass are like almost identical, like literally, and you're probably spraying Roundup on it or mowing it down and don't even know it. So get on Google or whatever, get your Plant ID app, whatever, good field guide, learn to identify peppergrass, because if we learned anything during the COVID pandemic, it was that store shelves could get empty very fast. and pepper's not grown in the United States. So if there was another pandemic, if there was an economic collapse, if there was a war, not you would really miss having black pepper. And not only that, but if you learn to use peppergrass seeds, you'd have something really valuable to trade or sell. So yeah, I mean this is one I would kind of like prioritize to get to know. I really think peppergrass works best in marinades and sauces. And speaking of ancient rum, here's one that includes several of the flavors that were popular and written about by the classic writer, the writer of the first modern Western cookbook, Apicius. And when I say modern, I mean about 2,000 years ago. Combine the peppergrass seeds, that's what we're going to use, with a small amount of rue. And he probably would have used long pepper. Long pepper was the most popular pepper in ancient Rome. And kind of hard to find these days. You might be able to order it through a spice catalog or from a specialty store. We normally use just regular black peppercorns. But long pepper, a little more mild. Anyway, I think it's pretty much interchangeable with peppergrass. So let's use peppergrass seeds and a little bit of rue. But only if you're not pregnant, because rue can be dangerous. The ancient Romans used rue a lot in their cooking, and frankly, I don't think it's as dangerous as people make out, but I always want to give that caveat. And anyway, they just use a pinch. And really any other green herb you like. You could use oregano, mint, marjoram, parsley, lovage. All that was commonly used in ancient Rome. Mix into olive oil, add some wine and honey, and a spoonful of fish sauce. And of course, the ancient Romans used a fish sauce called garum. But Asian fish sauces are very much the same. A Vietnamese or a Thai fish sauce is almost identical. You can leave it out, of course, if you like. It's not everybody's taste. And, a good substitute for fish sauce, if you don't like it, is just soy sauce. And they kind of had a similar sauce to soy sauce as well. It wasn't made with soybeans, but it was a bean ferment. And they really loved their garum, though. I mean, they really loved their garum. It was like the most prized thing on the table. And all it is fish salted, put in a crock, and left in the sun until they liquefy. Strain it out. Sometimes they'd add herbs and wine and spices. That was, I think, called liquamen. The red mullet was like so sought after they almost fished it to extinction. But it was often just made from anchovies as well. And a lot of Asian fish sauces are made from anchovies. You could also just add a dash of Worcestershire sauce. It's made with anchovies. It's actually an English fish sauce with a little tamarind and a little bit of this and that. So it's not. Don't freak out. Okay, that's all I'm saying. If you've ever had straight fish sauce straight from the bottle, it's pretty horrific. I mean, it's pretty horrific. But when combined in a dish with balancing flavors, it's really quite good, and you do develop a taste for it. I certainly have. Or, of course, you could just add an anchovy from a can, an anchovy in oil or a salted anchovy. It's going to be a little less assertive because it's not fermented, and it's still going to give you that kind of nice background flavor. But it's really good accompaniment with pork and chicken. So in ancient Rome, meat was often boiled, so it would be marinated in the sauce, and then the sauce would also be added to the water in which you're boiling it to season the water. I don't have any problem with that. Health officials now say don't cook with the marinade. It could be contaminated. If it's going to boil long enough to cook meat, I'm not going to worry about it. I think that's going to pretty much kill off any bacteria or anything. But take the expert's advice and don't take mine if you do worry about such things. It's just heavily herbed. I mean, you've got mint in there, and you've got a bitter rue, and you've got oregano and parsley, and then peppergrass, and it's assertive, but it's kind of mellowed by the honey and the wine, and it's really quite good. And when I put it on the table, I'm probably going to reduce that boiling water down and kind of use it as maybe a base for a little bit of sauce, and then add some more of the peppergrass on there. And I like hot peppers. They didn't have hot peppers in ancient Rome, but of course, I'm probably going to add some crushed red pepper at the very least, maybe a little cayenne, obviously. Um, they did use a lot of pepper, though, so it would have been a very spicy sauce. I mean, they use like we might put a sprinkle of pepper on a piece of meat while we're cooking it. They would use a ton of pepper, and it was a sign of wealth. So if your food was really peppery, um, you were showing off, and they just balance the pepper with a lot of honey. They kind of and some vinegar usually, or the juice of unripe grapes. I cannot remember the name of that right now, but it was almost like in sort of like Chinese cooking or German cooking, like you got a sauerbraten, right, or sweetened sour sauce in Chinese cooking. The agrodolce is what it's known as in modern Italy. It's balancing sweet of honey with the sour of vinegar or a sour wine. Usually they'd use a sweet wine though and actually add vinegar to it. So it would actually kind of balance it a little bit, and a lot of pepper and some bitter herbs. And it's really good. I mean, it hits all the taste buds. And frankly, I like ancient Roman cooking a lot. I've been kind of playing around with it. They would have also used ginger, cinnamon, cloves. Those are imported. And the more you added, the more wealth you were showing. But just do it to your taste. I mean, it's great with a pork loin marinate in a sauce like that, then just grill it up and serve it with a sauce kind of concentrated the same flavors. Sort of like a teriyaki sauce that would just punch you in the face, with all these like strong flavors. And it would also be a good way to experiment with some of those strong herbs like Oxeye Daisy or yarrow or a fireweed. Fireweed, the two varieties, and oh gosh, what's Eritron? Yeah, I think I believe that's the one. It has the white flower on top. It's not the pink one. It's strong, and it has a very pungent herbal flavor. I use it more as a seasoning. Then you wouldn't want to eat the whole plant. Trust me. It's really quite potent. So hey, experiment. I'm telling you, it's a good sauce. I mean, it's quite appetite inducing for me to even think about it, actually. And I don't like a lot of sweets, so I back off on the honey, and I don't use a sweet wine. You know, I just a little, just enough to balance the acid, like a sauerbraten. That's all you want, just enough sweet to balance the acid. All right, now let's get into our medicinal herb, and I think I can do two here as well. Yeah, I think I can. This comes from my book, The Medicinal Shrubs and Woody Vines. And we'll start with Amorpha or Indigo Bush. And there are three varieties of Amorpha that have documented use in herbal medicine. That's Amorpha canescens, I believe, known as lead plant more commonly, and false indigo and dwarf indigo bush. There's 6 actually native to my region, so not all of them have documentation at all. They're mostly called indigo bush or false indigo, dwarf indigo, Piedmont indigo even. All the indigo bushes seem to be similar in their actions. They bear an edible fruit that helps reduce mucus congestion. They're somewhat rare, even in my area where we have 6 of them, okay? But their range does cover much of the United States. They may not be among our most useful shrubs medicinally because they don't produce a lot of fruit. They're really pretty, and I would definitely consider adding these to your landscaping. I mean, you could really feature them in like a native plants wildflower garden or something, and use them when you're congested. And nice, right? All right, so here's one that's a little more well known, and it's Aronia. Now, Aronia berries have been extremely popular recently. And there are 3 varieties of Aronia, Aronia, that have documented use in herbal medicine. Red chokeberry, black chokeberry, and purple chokeberry. Specifically, that's Arbustifolia, Melanocoraga, and Melanocorapa, and Prunifolia. All 3 varieties are native to my region. Aronia, very important to the native tribes, the Cherokee and the Catawbas and all that, and was found useful by the settlers as well. I've never seen them grown commercially, and that's a shame because they really should be. And this is another one I would definitely add to the garden. But it is one that probably saved a lot of people's lives because the berry could be dried. It's actually in the rose family. Aronias are in the rose family. And the berries are a lot like rose hips. Except they don't have the itching quality of rose hips, which some do, some don't. But anyway, the fruit is very tart, very high in vitamin C. And it was one of the main berries used by Native Americans who made pemmican. Pemmican is really delicious. It sounds weird if you've never tried it. If you ever have tried it, it's great. It's dried meat. Not like beef jerky, but dried even further down, right? That's pounded up with berries and fat. And usually this would have been bear fat or duck or goose fat, whatever you could get. Just as long as it's not a strong smelling fat, which bear can be. They've been eating trash, but of course, back before people had dumpsters and trash cans, that wasn't quite as much of an issue. You would just have to be very careful that it wasn't a sow and heat, because that will really make everything, the fat and the meat, everything, just like with a pig, it just ruins it. So we hunt bear in the cold winter, and that's one reason why. So anyway, so you mashed up, just ground up, like a mortar and pestle, dried meat, dried berries, and aronia would have been one of the main ones. So would the wild blueberries and such as that. And like viburnum berries, they're very much like cranberries. A lot of these things just grow wild around that people don't really eat anymore. Grind it with the fat and any seeds and nuts you got. And it forms like a cake, essentially, and you leave it to dry. And that was basically the Native American fruitcake. It was your survival food. It would give you energy from the fats and everything, but the berries would also keep you from getting scurvy in the winter. So it was one of the most prized foodstuffs of Native American tribes in pre-modern times. Let's just put it that way. A lot of people still make it for traditional usage. You see at powwows and such, just to show that you're, kind of preserving the tradition. But a lot of people of all races that hunt or who live in cold weather, Alaska and Canada, it's very popular. They still make pemmican just because it tastes good, and it really is quite nice. I've been very, very privileged to grow up kind of in and around a tradition that still does that. All members of the rose family, of course, are astringent, and they can be used to stop diarrhea and reduce tissue inflammation. In that case, you would not be using it as a pemmican. You'd be making a tea out of it. And it does make just like rose hips, makes a very nice tea. So, all right, I guess we'll wrap it up there. You know what? Could I throw in one more? I think I can throw in one more. I think we got a little bit of time. How about Arundinaria? This is a variety of cane. And there's only one variety of Arundinaria that has documented use in herbal medicine, and it is Arundinaria gigantea. In other words, the big one. There are, however, 3 native to my area. These are sort of like bamboo type plants. It's a cane, a river cane, basically. Appalachian Arundinaria, which is hill cane, gigantea, which is the one that we have documented use on, and switch cane. And all these canes are in the grass family. They're really similar, and I'm not sure they can't be used interchangeably. I just can't find documentation on that. If I ever get around to experimenting, maybe I can tell you one way or the other. But I got 2 entries on this. The one from Plants for Future says, the root is cathartic. A decoction has been used to stimulate the kidneys and renew strength. That's all we know. But interestingly, in the physician's desk reference for herbal medicine, it listed as a bamboo and says it may be similar to the bamboos used in Indian medicine for asthma, arthritis, and cough. So, like I said, not a lot known about this one. If it's a cathartic, I'm not sure how it's going to help with asthma, arthritis, and coughs. But hey, if it stimulates the kidneys and helps renew strength, it's worth playing around with and seeing what we come up with. I mainly use the cane plants for basket weaving and such, the small bamboos, the thinner, more tender parts, really nice as staves and such as that. So anyway, it's one I need to explore. Hey, if you know anything about Arundinaria, let me know. I'd be interested if you have experience with this plant. I was unable to find anything about it in any of the Carolina and Georgia tribes. This is it. This is all I got on that one. So we'll wrap it up with that one. Oh, next week we'll get into one of my favorites, the pawpaw tree. I love pawpaws. I'm a pawpaw fanatic, really. So look forward to that one. And, y'all have a wonderful rest of this Christmas season. If you're like me, you celebrate the 12 days of Christmas. We're still in it. We don't take down your tree yet. Don't take down your lights. We're still celebrating Christmas. And of course, Hanukkah is still ongoing. And if you celebrate New Year's, try not to party too hard, but if you do, make sure it was worth it. And I hope everyone has a very happy New Year. I have great hope and expectations for 2025. I did not have great hope and expectations for 2024. I was actually in great trepidation much of the year, given the wars and economic issues and everything political going on. I have an incredible hope for this next year, and really for the next 4 years, and hopefully beyond that. Things seem to be turning around and finally starting to go in the right direction again. So anyway, y'all, have a good one, and I'll talk to you next time.
The information in this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease or condition. Nothing I say or write has been evaluated or approved by the FDA. I'm not a doctor. The U.S. government does not recognize the practice of herbal medicine, and there is no governing body regulating herbalists. Therefore, I'm really just a guy who studies herbs. I'm not offering any advice. I won't even claim that anything I write or say is accurate or true. I can tell you what herbs have been traditionally used for. I can tell you my own experience and if I believe an herb has helped me. I cannot nor would I tell you to do the same. If you use an herb anyone recommends, you are treating yourself. You take full responsibility for your health. Humans are individuals and no two are identical. What works for me may not work for you. You may have an allergy, a sensitivity, an underlying condition that no one else even shares and you don't even know about. Be careful with your health. By continuing to listen to my podcast or read my blog, you agree to be responsible for yourself, for your own research, make your own choices, and not to blame me for anything ever.